they're going to change their name.
Are we ready? Quorum.
I don't have myself, but I have.
So we do also have some attendees that are not panelists that we have here in the meeting today. So the wish of the committee, should I just promote everyone to panelists so everyone can see everyone that's on the call, or?
How many do you have?
So
6.
we have 6. One, I can't promote the caller to panelists because it's a call-in, but we do have 5 other attendees. So with the permission of the committee, I just like to promote everyone for transparency to be able to see who's here with us tonight.
2 board members. Leslie.
Want to thank everybody again for their patience. We're trying to promote everyone now. Spirit of transparency, being able to see everyone that's here with us tonight. We really appreciate everyone for joining us.
Okay, so I clicked on my name, Don. It still shows me.
When I have 2
3 dots.
attendees that I'm trying to promote to panelists,
Just type it in.
and I keep hitting the button, but I don't see them moving. And we have another committee member that's just joined us.
6.
They have to agree to be promoted, so if they don't click the button, then it won't move forward.
Okay, and if anyone would like to be promoted and it has not worked, if you could just chat me, I'll be sure to promote you. I think with that, we have the agenda here, but we can go ahead and get started with the meeting and do the roll call.
Probably would be roll call, or you want me to do that, or? Yes, please. Good evening, everybody. Scott Sheldon with Terrell Realty Advisors. We would like to open up this meeting. We'll start with a roll call. So the committee, if you could please affirmatively indicate that you're on this call. Don
Here.
Doreen Chand,
Here.
James Henry Saunders,
Here.
Samantha
Here.
Merlin Sigler,
Here.
Trey Holland,
Here.
Diane. So we have 6 members of the committee here. That constitutes a quorum. Next order is approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any comments on the agenda?
None.
If not, then I'll ask for an approval of the agenda or motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
It's been moved. We have a second
Second.
and a second. We need to do a roll call for this also.
Yes,
Let's do a quick roll call.
all votes have to be recorded.
So Don Gosney,
Yes.
Doreen Chan,
Approve? A second?
No, just to approve it. It's already been moved and seconded. Do you approve?
Approve.
Samantha Antoris,
Yes.
Summerlin Sigler,
Yes.
Ray Holland,
Yes.
unanimous. So the next meeting date is set for September 27th at 6 p.m. Mark that on your calendar. And the next order of business will be public comment. Member of the public are invited to speak on any matters related to the 7-Eleven committee at this time. Members of the public may individual items of interest in the agenda as the item discussed. Do we have any public comments?
Doesn't appear so, not at this time.
No public comment. So let's move on to item number D, discussion items. First item on that is property assessment. That will be presented by Scott Sheldon and Barry Schimmel with Terra Realty Advisor. So this will be a point presentation. So this is a presentation of the properties that this committee has been tasked at looking at. So, and this is our meeting number 2A, I guess, maybe for lack of a better term. So next. Nope. There we go. So again, the site review is going to cover the 4 sites, Adams, Harman Knowles, Portola, and Seaview. So from an overall perspective, it's always good to have, this is a map that shows within the greater North Bay area where the 4 sites are located. So starting in Emeryville, there would be the Portola site that would be at the bottom part of the screen, and then going north, Adams, Harman Knowles, and Seaview. As I mentioned, is in Emeryville. Adams is in Contra Costa County. Knowles is in the city of Richmond, and the Seaview site is in the incorporated part of Contra Costa County.
Correction would be El Cerrito.
Sorry,
El Cerrito.
Emeryville.
El Cerrito. Emeryville. Thank you. I stand corrected. The E part right.
A little far south.
Yeah, a little far south. So we're going to start with Adams, and again, unincorporated Contra Costa. So this is a very interesting site. What you're seeing on the screen is basically the property outline of the property. We're going to be looking at things. This is a plan view. You'll different configuration or look when we look from an elevation perspective. But this is a compilation of a lot of different sites that was acquired back in the I think 50s. But you can see it wraps around Patterson Circle. There's a private school that is in that center part there, just to the north of the main school buildings. And then there are field areas, asphalt areas, etc. on that. So what we did was we took the areas of the school site that were in essence level, and from the last one, it's almost 9-acre site in total. But these are the areas where there are basically benches, if you will, or flat areas within there. All the other areas that are outside of that are fairly topographic. Next. So this will give you a better, again, perspective site. The left picture is at the top of Patterson Circle, aiming basically to the west, down that street. And then again, to the right, you can see the area that's along Arlington there, one benched area. This is kind of shooting across that upper bench area off of Arlington towards the 3-story building, and that Patterson Road on the left-hand side that you can see that goes in front of there. And then you can a closer view of that from the right-hand photo. So these are the two areas that would be to the property, and there are two areas that it goes down. You can see in the left-hand picture, kind of in the distance, the pile, and then you can see the pile up close. So it actually steps down as part of that. So there's one level, drops down. This is a view back side of the three-story building. The entry or the frontage along Path is actually at the top level, so it's there. And then on the right side are one of the streets that go up, go back part of the old school. So in terms of the legal part of it, there's as we talked about before in the first meeting, there's general plan and a zoning that affects all properties in the state of California. Inside is the general plan, and that is the big picture that municipalities have, whether county in this case or a city, where they do basically broad swaths of and then as you drill down, you get to the zoning part of it. So what is indicated in the zoning or the general plan documents is that is a public, semi-public designation, which was typical for schools, municipal buildings, corporation yards, those kinds of uses. On the right-hand side, you can see that a new general plan, the county is in that it's just basically proposed. So we met with the representative, the county supervisor, Dr. John Joya, and we talked about some of the challenges with this site, which we're going to be talking about in a couple of minutes. But they have not designated that. They have an idea that they wanted to do a high housing, or an apartment style housing. So on, there's going to be some challenges that we talked about with him, but in the next couple of slides.
Excuse me,
Yes,
you just said they wanted to do.
I mean the county,
I mean,
County Planning Department?
county plan.
I thought that we owned it.
No, but this is a planning document.
Yes,
So
but-
for planning purposes, municipalities can general plan anything.
Yeah, I would hope though that there'd be a partnership where a collaborative effort, the county and the owners of the property to decide.
And that's what,
I mean, sorry, we've been having a lot of problems with the county stepping into this. All of a sudden telling us, for instance, we on the other side of the waterways, the Point Melati Naval Fuel, all of a sudden our county supervisor decided that it's going to be, even though it belongs to the city of Richmond. I mean, it's very contentious politics involved with this kind of stuff. And so if you got the county stepping in without even, speaking for the people without ever speaking to the people, it's a concern. I wanted to make sure that I didn't miss.
you did not misunderstand. They are going through a public process whenever they do a general plan or a zoning. That's why they have it as a proposed. They don't have it in.
It's only public when the public knows it's actually.
There's a series, and they're supposed to, publish and everything else. Again, we've not been part of that process. It's been going on for a while, but it is, and that would be again. We brought up to John Joya again the fact that doing a high density housing or designating it as high density housing is, it may be a nice exercise to go through. Being able to do something in that area with the constraints that are on it may be a real challenge if possible.
It begs the question, has anybody from the county actually talked to the members of the community living right there, asking them if they want hundreds of more cars on there? So when a couple of years ago, when they were talking about transferring it to a charge, an additional 900, 1,200 drop-offs and pickups a day there. The community didn't know anything about that. That's
Okay.
one of the reasons the charter school is not there now.
Got it. Well, again, this is one of those things that, it's an awareness for us as part of the West Contra Costa schools system in looking at the assets here. And again, the county does have to go process. We're not aware of what they've done or haven't done. They could have already done that. I don't know, but it is in the process of being changed in the general plan. Now, just because it's a general plan, municipalities have the ability to change their general plan 4 times a year. So even if it's zoned or general planned in some way, shape, or form, it can be changed again. So what we'd like to do is be proactive with the county, and as part of the recommendation that this body is going to come up with is to ask them to potentially rezone it to that. So that would be part of, that's where I'm going with all of this.
All that makes sense.
Good.
Were you gonna say something, Jim?
I just, did Mr. Joya reveal a timeline with respect to rezoning?
They just said that they were going through the process right now. He did not tell a timeline on it. And sometimes these things can take, I've been part of general plan processes before. We probably set a world record on the one I was on. It went for 4 years before it was adopted. But they're typically a year plus process because you're doing a fairly large area. And a county would be doing a very large area.
Last time I sat on the city of Richmond's committee to help draft the rezoning. We stopped after 3.5 years before we turned over our suggestions to the city, which then drug the feet for another 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, it's again, the housing element in the general plan is that's a little bit more time sensitive in terms of that, because that goes to the state. The other stuff, again, it's not unusual to have it go for 1 year to 2 years. And again, it can go longer than that. Okay, so let's move on, because there's some other things that are going to impact on this also. So again, the current zoning, so there's a general plan, that's the high level document that, paints a fairly wide paintbrush. But the current zoning is R6, which would allow 6 units to the acre. That's the designation on that. And that is all the area that you see. So that whole area there, including the school campus, already has a residential underlying designation, which again is not atypical at all for schools. They can be general planned as a public or a PQP, which is a public quasi-public, or an institutional, and still have an entirely different zoning underneath that that's probably more representative of the surrounding properties. In this case, that's no exception. Next.
Sorry, so the current zoning, that's 6 units per property.
Per acre.
Per acre, sorry, thank you, per acre. By the time you add streets to that, you're probably talking about perhaps 45, give or take 5 or 6 single-family residential units.
It depends. Some cities count streets as part of that and some do not. So I don't know how the county accounts for that. But in theory, if you have 8 acres, let's say, in theory, you should be able to get right around that, 48 plus or minus.
Didn't you say we had like 9.3 acres?
Not a little under 9 acres. A little under 9 acres.
Thank you.
So one of the things that this is the old subdivision map from 1911. So you can kind of see in the red area right there, some of the the old lots that were platted out back in the day. And one of the questions that came up, and it wasn't at the last meeting, I believe it was the very first meeting, was that there was some urban legend, maybe for lack of a better term, that Patterson Street was actually owned by the district. And it is not. It is, and I think that probably where that came from is if you look at that map, you'll see a lot of streets like Roslyn Street or Roslyn Avenue. And that goes in, there's all those streets that are inside the red marked area that delineates what the Adams site is. Those are all old city streets, which were part of the original subdivision that were actually abandoned by the county. So that, I'm not saying that is or it isn't, but we did confirm that Patterson is a city street.
Right. If I could, please. It sounds like it was parceled out. Was anything actually ever built on it?
I do not know. That I don't know.
But one reason I ask is there's a history book about the Richmond Windows of the Past, which there's a nice photograph taken from quite literally where I live. At San Pablo Avenue near McBride, pointing out towards this area. And between where the photographer was and Wildcat Canyon, you could see three houses, and it was 1911.
Right.
And so
So there's your 1911 map right there that shows the original. Now, this is all paper lots. So again, they were built over time. My guess is that a lot of those houses were built in the 20s and 30s. So again, that's just my speculation on that, because it's not uncommon, and we've seen that in our practice, where somebody comes in and does a map. Again, this is an old map, and it takes many, many years before it actually comes to fruition, and people actually do the roads and the infrastructure that it would take to actually create the houses. Now, we can certainly find that out, and there's other ways of doing that. We have historical photo access, and we can run stuff, and we have run stuff in the past, back almost 100 years. So we can get, sort of the history of that. But again, I put this in to demonstrate that there are streets and sections of streets that are actually part of the of this site, of the Adams site, that were originally planned as city streets. Next. One of the other significant constraints on this site is you can see where it says Adams site and the arrow going in there. That yellow swath through there is what's known as the Alquist Priola zone, and it's a active fault zone that encompasses that entire area. And again, the Adams site is right there. So there are significant hurdles to that, because being next to a fault, there's earthquake issues, there's seismic issues for construction and all of that. And again, there's been cut and fill. You can tell that obviously from the flat areas and the slope areas that make up all of that. But again, in order to develop anything on that site, there would be further testing and boring that would need to occur. A big part of that then would depend on, what it was. Are they residences? Are they something other than, are they single family houses or apartments or whatever? And again, the more dense it is, the harder it is to develop in these kinds of zones.
It's a small question, but I think your arrow is about 3 blocks north of where it ought to be. I used to go up Solano Avenue and make a right turn to get to Adams.
Okay, then it's still in the yellow zone.
No dispute.
Yeah.
It's just where
Okay,
you're
we will-
indicating that the Adams site is, I think you're off a little bit. 'Cause
Okay.
I believe that the Adams site is
That kind of goes
south
up.
of Solano Avenue.
And part of the issue there is that is a map that the state puts out, and they block out everything. A lot of times they'll
Yeah,
they'll tint it a little bit so you can see a little bit more on that. So, but we have confirmed it is actually all in Alquist Priola.
right, because you're showing Tulare at the bottom, Tulare and Yale. And I believe that those streets are the southern border of the parcel.
Hard for me to see on this with my failing eyeballs.
So that would be more down here, right? It's hard, because it's hard to see from here.
Yeah,
Here, right,
it's hard.
Yale.
Yeah, okay. Noted. We will make that correction for the historical record of this.
Okay,
Next.
I'm actually looking at a map from 1947. Shows a few residences up in that area, but not the streets that we were seeing on the parcel map.
Yeah, and I was in terms of the timeline, it just looks like it was, 20s, 30s, right, that kind of architecture in that time frame. So, but a lot of them have been remodeled too. So this is a map. This is a civil map, and again, I wanted to put it in to show the topography, and so the really dense lines that are in both of these, which represents both sides of the parcel. There's 2 different maps. It's a lot of topography, and we want to demonstrate that even if there's a little less than 9 acres, or significantly less in terms of what you can actually develop. So we did a title report on this property, and the district acquired the title in 1953. There are easements, some of which are plotted, some of which are not. And those are both wet and dry. And when I say wet and dry, wet is like water and sewer, and dry are things like gas and power. You know, there are the abandoned roads that have been deeded over and have become part of the parcels that are there now. And that we graphically showed on another slide. There's conditions, covenants, and restrictions that were put in place with the original map that limit things and uses to mainly saloons and things like that would not be permitted in that area. But there are some other uses also. And again, we're going back 110 years in terms of, you know, what was important. And I've read lots and lots of different CC&Rs, which are the condition, covenants, and restrictions, and they have all kinds of different things in them. It depends on, you know, who was doing what to who at that time. So there are building height restrictions on portions of the property, and there are building setback restrictions. And again, those are all referenced in the documents that we have from the title report. So that the title report will become part of the historical record on this. Next. So what we did on this, because I think it's really important to understand when you're making decisions on what to do with something, is what do you think the value of this something is? So we made the assumption that with the constraints that are impacting this property, that includes the topography, that includes the restrictions on things that would come from the Alquist Priola zone, and what you can do and what you can't do, how high you can go in that. We assumed about a 6 unit per acre, which is what the underlying zoning is, you know, on basically 6 acres of usable land. And again, obviously, this is all subject to further geotech and things like that. It would also, there would have to be a demo factor applied to that too, because we're making the assumption it would be basically ready to build. So with that, the comps in the area, and we did run comps for the different things and under different solutions, and is about $25 to $35 a foot, which would impute a value of somewhere between $6.5 and $9 million. Again,
Is that square foot figure? Is that RCN? Is that right?
just square foot of dirt.
Okay. Carry on.
So again, that is making the assumption, again, from a developer perspective, that they don't have to come in. That would be what they'd be able to pay for a site that they could then go in and start developing. So if there are buildings on it, those would have to be taken off. That would be a deduct. So again, it's a framework and a point of reference, you know, in terms of what you build, but this is the assumptions that we used on that.
Has anything been done to try to determine what it would cost to turn that into just a plain piece of ground, clean ground?
No, we've got budget numbers that we do on, you know, for demo. And again, you know, up till 2 years ago, it was a lot easier to make assumptions on things. It's been a really crazy market in the construction world, and that would include demolition. But we've typically looked at, you know, anywhere from $5 to $7 a square foot, you know, of the building area to demolish. These buildings are about 90,000 feet plus or minus.
Yeah, I worry about how much asbestos and lead-based paint.
That would not include the hazmat, because hazmat is something I don't know, Louis, if anybody's actually done a hazmat assessment of that. We did that at another school district, but we haven't done it here.
Just considering when it was built, the time period.
Absolutely
Yeah.
understand. If it was acquired in the 50s, I think the buildings were built in the 50s also.
Don, your point's spot on, because the demo is one cost. The hazardous materials, which would still need to be identified, there's a cost to doing that, plus then removing it before the demo.
I worry that we might have to pay somebody to take the property off our hands.
And again, all we can do as a point of reference is come up with a value of it as a ready to do something with
Yes.
site. The key would be, what is that? But again, if you do the order of magnitude math, I don't want to be held to this, but let's just say that the order of magnitude is 90,000 feet of buildings there. We'll make the assumption that it's just a demo cost. You know, obviously, you know, if it's $5 a square foot, that's what, 450,000, and if it's $10 a square foot, it's $1 million, something like that, that order of magnitude. So,
When you came up with the figure for the bare ground, has the soils report been done? Do you know whether it's, if the parcel as it exists is fill underneath the asphalt?
there
or-
is fill.
Because there's a lot of rock in the hills there.
It's cut and fill, and you can see that, that's how they terraced everything. And again, we made a caveat in there that, it's subject to further geotech research, that's the soils. So we had to make an assumption of something, and then from that, there would probably be deducts off of that. If somebody were to say, look, I want to build something on this property, then they would have to go through, okay, here's what I can pay for it, but now what's it going to cost to get to that point where I can actually build something and I have a clean piece of property to build on. So again, in the order of magnitude thing, it's easy to estimate what the value of the dirt would be to do something with it. But then the other part of it, because there's so much unknowns on it, is, what do I do with the, how do I do that? And again, I think, if you're even in that $10 square foot range, we'll just call it $1 million. Now, what are the environmental considerations on it? And again, that number was pre-COVID. So right now we're seeing fairly significant changes. And Louis, you probably are also in what you're doing in terms of, the value of it. If it was, we're bidding a project, we're bidding 2 projects right now. And in pre-COVID, we had one, it was for a public agency, and we were doing 15,000 square foot build out in an existing building, brand new, and just doing the tenant improvement. And we were at $2.8 million. We're now at 4.2. And that's just in 2 years. So that is and so I'm hesitant to throw numbers at that because it would really take, to have a confidence level in this, it would really take somebody to go out there and actually hard bid what it would cost to demo this property. But the benchmark would be if I believe that it's between $6.5 and $9 million as a finished product. That's where you can make value decisions off of that. Is it worthwhile to spend $1 million to get $6 million?
And the point that Scott's bringing up about the hazardous materials, we could go out and get a number today in September of 22. And by the time that we got ready to do the work, a couple years down the road, that number based on circumstances could be off by as much as 50 to 100%.
Yeah, time is never your friend on this.
We're all seeing this with a couple of rebuilds for our local high schools where,
It's crazy world.
I mean,
Just crazy.
going by a factor of doubling to 200 to 230% of what it was a couple of years ago.
Now, the good news on that is and we're active enough in that market, is that some of this appears to be leveling off. Of course, it went like this and leveling off. It's still a big difference from here to here. And those of you who can't see me, I just, sorry about that. It's a leveling off is still at a new norm. And again, over time, that's going to have an impact on what somebody can pay for land, because they're going to, if they can build and sell for more, it'll raise the price of land, but that doesn't happen in a linear fashion. Okay, so next. So let's move on to Harman Knowles. That's within the city limits of Richmond. What you're seeing here on the screen is the totality. It's a little bit under 9 acres. If I'm so, yeah, just a little under 9 acres of land. But you'll see that there's 2 different boxes there. What we did is a single parcel. And what we did was we took the area that the 5 acres, and that's basically where the fence line is, and then carved that out. And that was there were some old facilities there that they're taken down. And then there is a park area, a little under 4 acres, and that area is actually supposed to be maintained by the city of Richmond. I have a different definition of maintenance, but that is still part of the district-owned property. So we have a document that we received from the city of Richmond that there was an agreement on this particular property. It is sunsetted, which means it's expired. But there's still a park there, there's equipment there. So one of the recommendations that this committee has to look at is how do we want to treat this property? So, do we do something, with the city of Richmond for the 3.78 acres and then do something different with a vacant lot of 5 acres? But so I want everybody to keep that in mind when we come through and start developing recommendations for these properties.
So can you please explain the status of that open space between the houses and the left-hand,
Okay, so,
where,
so from the left, so Melissa, so where it says Hilltop Park to the left of that?
sorry, yeah, I guess you can, I can't see, read that
So
well.
right there to the left.
Right,
Yes,
correct.
that area
That
there,
area is actually owned by the city of Richmond.
okay. But, I mean, I would have to think it would be beneficial for everybody concerned, for a collaborative effort for the entire vacant area.
Mhm.
Do something with it. It just doesn't seem to make sense that that very small little sliver would be maintained as still just a vacant lot.
I'm not saying one
Yeah,
way or the
no.
other. I'm just pointing out that there's an issue here, that there's an expired agreement on that
Yeah.
3 acre, 4 acre piece. That the city, I'm sure they're counting that in their general plan as part of their park and open space area, which they have some requirements on. But again, the ownership is with the district. So again, that's going to be one of the things that we're going to need to talk about as a committee as to what direction, do you want to advise the board on how to deal with this particular piece of property in both sides of it? Yes, sir.
Is there a memorialized agreement between the school district and the surrounding community with respect to building the school or not building the school? In other words, was the district obligated to build a school there at some time? And has that agreement lapsed, as you say, that I don't know if it's in the, since I haven't seen the agreement, I don't know what the terms of the agreement were.
There was nothing in public record on that because we ran the title reports on all of these. So there was nothing shown in the public record that there was an agreement for anything. In fact, there was no agreement in the public record for the city to be, using that as park area right there. Nothing, but there was an agreement that the city of Richmond had, and obviously the district also. Again, that agreement expired in, I believe it was 2021.
I think that what Jim is referring to is nothing that was codified in writing, but just what had been told over the years by district staff to the community there, that when they rebuild Highland Elementary School, they were going to rebuild it at this site. And I think that we understand the way the bond market is going and the way our program is going, and the ranking of Highland on there, that it's unlikely that even if if the district wanted to build a new school there, we're talking 12 to 15 years maybe before that could even be seriously considered, and that's a lifetime. My own feeling is that whatever's decided, that the district needs to tell this community what we thought we were going to do before is just not going to happen.
Yeah, and that could very well be the case. I mean, there's always a lot of things that go along with these things, especially over time, where, when the site was required, what are you going to do with it? And again, I don't have any knowledge of that, but I'm not saying that hasn't been floated around, because again, that's very typical. Yeah.
I deal with that community quite a bit, especially the neighborhood council, and every time they see me, they want to know what's going on with their new school. I try to let them down easily.
Nothing right now. But that I can say. with,
Question.
Yes.
Sorry, hi. So, in terms of the city area, the area that is designated as city versus park, that line, if you will, is there a contestation? Is there, I know we said the community had plans, but I want to know the section, the sliver that the city owns, is there going to be, some sort of if the school district wanted to acquire the rest, or if, let's say, the city wanted to acquire the other half that the school district has, would there be some sort of legal battles there? Or is there any ambiguity about this? Like, what is aside from, rumors and all of that? Because it sounds like Barry's not familiar with a lot of things about this kind of area, this history. There's nothing written, so there's nothing formal. But do you think the city has knowledge or expectations that may present legal issues?
Okay, so let me answer that in kind of a legal way, not really, but kind of. So when I look at things like this, that's why in real estate, you always want to write things down. That way there's less chance of a misunderstanding. And in our search of the public records, and again, we received and have title reports on each one of these properties, as being no exception. There is nothing in the title report that said anything about a cooperative agreement or what the school district was going to do. What it does reference, there are CC&Rs in there, and we're going to get to that in a minute, because one of the CC&Rs, there is a condition on that if it's not used for a school site. But there's nothing in the public record that the city of Richmond has, nor I believe, Lewis, that the district has, that says that there's going to be anything here other than we acquired the site. That's in the public record. That would be recorded and easily accessible. So, again, we did have a conversation with the city of Richmond, and we did talk about this property. They would like to keep the property and the park, which would include, it's about 2 acres, the little sliver off to the left-hand side there outside of the yellow line. They would like to keep that. So they, basically you have just a little under a 6-acre park area right there. And again, that was the conversation that we had with the city. So again, one of the goals and responsibilities of this committee, the 7-Eleven committee, is going to be, what do we do with this property? What direction do we want to give to the board on how to deal with this property? And, with that. Again, it's being surplused or proposed to be surplus. So my assumption under that scenario would be that the district does not need this now or in the future. That would be my assumption.
Scott,
Hi,
go ahead.
this is Serena. I have another follow-up question. Has anyone surveyed the surrounding community here as to what they would like to be done with that parcel of land?
No.
And if not, is this something we can do?
Well, let me jump to something else, because that's again, the district, and this committee needs to make recommendations, and they can make a recommendation that you don't want to surplus it. You can make that recommendation, or you can make a recommendation to surplus it, which allows, again, the district to do other things with that. And again, these are all recommendations, from this committee. But let me
define what you mean by surplus. What do you mean when you say surplus?
So legal definition, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to say that it's, a precise definition in the ed code, but it basically, for ed code purposes, which is how school districts are run, is that it is no longer, it's a piece of property that is no longer needed for educational purposes by that district. So therefore, you can do something else with it.
So can you expand on that? Again, I'm not just speaking to you, I'm speaking, we got a lot of people that we're not even seeing, but aren't there certain restrictions about who it has to be offered to first before the district can sell the property or trade it?
Not necessarily.
They don't have to give it to another government agency or offer it to a charter school or offer it to a nonprofit?
No. So, but it depends on what the district wants to do with it. So I don't want to get too far out of our lane here, but but there are mechanisms. So surplus is one thing, and then so again, that's identifying that it's no longer needed for educational purposes. Okay, well, what does that mean? Are you going to hang on to it? Are you going to try to do something with it? So there are 2 different processes that you can go through, and I'm going to keep this short. So there's the typical process that, you know, that some school districts do where you go through, we're going to sell it. We're just going to sell it. So there's a process to do that. And that means that you're offering it up to other agencies. You have 60 days that you have to do public notices to your park and rec departments, your, you know, your counties, your cities, you know, that, the institutional people. They have 60 days and they can make an offer. District doesn't have to take the offer, but they can make an offer. At the end of that time period, then if they don't have any offers from any public agencies, then they can go out and they can offer it to the public. And again, it doesn't mean that they have to sell it to the public. They could come in, nobody could bid on it. Nobody could, you know, or the bids aren't acceptable, and in which case nothing happens. So that's one track that you can go through if you sell, but you can go through another track that on an exchange where you can, you know, go out and exchange that property for another piece of property that the district may need that they could use for educational purposes, or they could use for an investment. And that is a very simple process, and it doesn't require offering up anything. So, and then you can go through a ground lease process, and you can do the same thing on that too. So again, it's a fairly straightforward process, but there's two different pathways that you can go on that.
Scott?
If we went on the first track, is there any limitation to the usage of that land? For instance, if we decide to sell it to public then private second, can we limit what the buyer can do with that, or no?
Yes, you can. And again, there's whatever you do in terms of limiting the use obviously has an impact on how you would be. So again, it depends on what it is, but I'll give you an example, because we did went through a process on one, and we actually put a deed restriction in there that it could not be used for the growth or growing of cannabis. So, so again, there was a school district property. They wanted to sell it, but they didn't want cannabis grown on it. So you can do that. Now, it had an impact on value because it would have been sold for a lot more money, but you can do that.
Samantha has
Thanks,
her
that's very
hand up.
helpful.
Okay, so
Hi.
Could we hear from
Sorry,
Samantha,
yeah.
please?
I'm
Hi,
sorry.
thank you. Yes. Yeah, I do use the hand raise and lower function. So my question about the restrictions on selling the property. I know we said we're going to get to the CCNRs. Can we start talking about those now? Because I know that we can decide, you know, if we decide to surplus this, we can add our own kind of qualifications about that. But what are the existing qualifications?
So let's move on to that if we can, Melissa.
So can I ask one question, a favor, please? We have a couple of speakers that are logged in using their telephone name or telephone number. If they're going to speak, maybe they could tell us their names, because all we got is a number.
So that's committee member Doreen Chan.
Okay, so but again, just for the record, even just say who you are.
Will do.
Thank you very much. Keep in mind, we're recording this.
Okay, so we're going to go through a couple pictures before we get to the other stuff. So this is a picture from Groom that is in the parcel, or the picture on the left is actually it's the vacant parcel that would be on the right-hand side of the plan view. And then standing in the same location and then turning to the left, which would be south, that's the entrance into the park area right there.
Fine looking park.
Yeah. So this is the school site on the left. And then on the right, there's a playground that showed on the aerial view on the first one. There's actually two of them, but that's the one that's closest to the street. And then the picture on the left is on standing on the park area, and then the fence that you see up there is the fence that divides. That's where the 3.78 acres and the 5.09 acres separate. So they're separated. So that is the area that's part of the agreement on the grassy area, the green grassy area right there. That's part of the district-owned property, but it is or was at one time a part of the lease to the city for. And then, yeah. There we go. Okay, so in the, again, looking at what the political ramifications are on this, there's a general plan and a zoning. And the general plan is public, and it's the little green box right there. You can see this is in the Richmond general plan document. And the current zoning is for Parks and Rec. So all the land around it, the yellow land, that's all the single family homes, and that's what the zoning is. It's like an R6 type zoning right there.
The houses that are to the left of the park are actually multiple unit.
They are.
So that's not R1 zone.
It's a variance on that. So they just went in and did either a PD or something like that on it. So again, not atypical at all. They have an underlying zoning with a different, those are older units too in there. They're older
Yeah, they
houses.
looked at.
So that could have been rezoned at some point in time. So what happens on that, and again, fairly typical, is you end up with a legal non-conforming type use. So if that house were to, or that place were to burn down, you'd be only able to build a single family house on it.
Do we have a question?
Yes, from Trey. Yes, Trey.
Hi, yeah, I was just wondering how the zoning, current zoning is impacting any of the potential decision-making or cost. And if there are any, if there's been any discussion at all or thought to any park and rec zoning that exists already to just maybe improving infrastructure for potential sports use and like, community fee-based use for parks and rec type activities?
That is a great suggestion to bring up in terms of, what this committee would like to recommend to the board to do with the property.
Okay.
So, hold that thought on that, because again, what this group is going to be doing is what we're doing is going through an analysis of what's there, what are the political and legal implications that go along with that, and what the value might be based on certain set of assumptions. And then it's up to you as this group to make recommendations of what you want to see. We're just trying to frame this picture for you.
I like one additional question. The line that divides the two parks is arbitrary or not? It's parallel to the eastern border, right? As you drew it on the photograph, on the overhead view. But if you wanted to develop more than the 5.09 acres, you could move the line. If possible.
Good, because it's actually not a line. It's one parcel.
Right.
The middle line, if we go back to, thank you, Melissa, going back to the original area, that's artificial. So the middle line that divides these two parcels, that's a parcel line.
Right.
That's just a line that shows where the fence is to show the area that is subject or was subject to this lease agreement. That's all it is. The whole parcel, the whole, 8.88 acres is all one legal parcel. And then when we advance back through again, you'll see that on the zoning maps. All it shows is that one little 2-acre piece, and that's one parcel. And then the other one is the entire, like I said, the 8 acres. So.
Right.
So there you go. So if you're looking at the right-hand map there, the zoning map, you can see the big green area right there. That encompasses all of the property. But the left-hand, the pole piece, that's the 2 acres that the city actually owns. The rest of it is one single property and it's owned by the district. Okay. And there's your assessor parcel map that kind of demonstrates all of that. So let's get a little bit into the title stuff, and I think that'll answer, Doreen, one of your questions. So the district acquired title to this property in 1965. Again, very common. There's utility easements, PG&E that run, into the property somewhat, and then along the perimeter. Again, very typical. There's a provision for certain water rights, but here's one of the key provisions that stood out to me in my review of the CC&Rs, which is the conditions, covenants, and restrictions, is that the land was originally, when it was developed, was restricted to residential and business use if designated on city zoning maps. And then the number 7 is the other one, that there is a provision in there that if it's not used for a school site, then it needs to be multifamily housing. Now, that's in the CCNRs. That's something that, everybody needs to be aware of. And again, I don't believe that it trumps zoning law, but it is a conflict with zoning law, or the zoning in this area.
Right, not on this, not on that one side.
It's on the site that the school site
If
is.
we're on the other side of, the other side of the city's parcel is,
That's a completely separate parcel.
I understand that, but in trying to fit something in with the community.
Mhm.
If one had multiple family dwellings, it would be consistent with that which was given a variance on that one side.
It could very well be, and that may be, it could have, again, I didn't run the title report on those properties, but you bring up a good point. That could have been overlaid on all of that, where if it's not going to be used for something, then it would be, for that use. Again, I don't know the answer to that, but it wouldn't surprise me if that was in there.
Louis, what has the district used that site for over the decades? Do you know?
The last known use on it was the Laheim Academy. They were operating out of that site up until around 2010, possibly.
Was that a district operated?
No.
I didn't think so.
No, it was private
Okay.
school, mostly serving special needs students.
Or do we know anything? I mean, it
After that-
seems like we had a quarter of a century or longer, 35 years of use prior to that. Do you know if anything else was used?
So when we look back at the original plans that we shared with Scott, it showed that there was a community center building on a portion of it, and then the school on another portion. It must have been a very small schoolhouse that was there at the time.
So I mean, just my thinking is that the school district really didn't use it all that much for educational purposes themselves.
Yeah, I can't really say that up until the time that Laheim took over it. There were temporary type buildings that were on there at the time that we did.
Thank you.
Scott, we may be ready to move on. I'm doing a bit of a time check.
No, that's fine. Again, with just the last 2 things we jumped around, number 5 and number 6 on that, again, that there's setback restrictions on portions of the property. And there's also slope easement. That basically runs down to the parkway because there's a fairly significant elevation change between this property and the parkway property. Okay, so we'll move on.
This is Doreen. What is abutters right?
I'm sorry? Oh,
What is
abutters?
abutters right?
So it means that there is no public access, and that's the Parkway property down at the base of the hill there. There are no access rights for somebody to come in and say, hey, I want to come off of this street and access my property. So when these properties were all subdivided, and again, very typical along highways where you lose your abutter rights, and all that means is that you do not have access to your property from that parcel line. Does that help?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, again, we're going through the same set of criteria here, looking at, helping frame this discussion for this group. And we made the assumption, we took a look at, from the title stuff and said, look, if this is a multifamily type property, we said 5 units or 5 acres. So we took just the 5-acre parcel and said, we don't know what we can do with the 3.7 acre. There's, I don't know if there's legal issues with that, but there's certainly political issues with that, with the use of the park and everything else. So what we did was try to frame just the 5-acre portion of that, said if we can do a townhome unit project, 18 units of the acre, very easily achieved, then, the indicated value range of that in that area is between $35 and $39 a square foot, which would impute a value of somewhere between $7.6 and $8.5 million as a development site. Again, the caveat would be, we know that there were buildings on there before. We assume that there's nothing that would, cause additional remediation or anything else on that. It's fairly level. So it didn't look like there would be a lot of site work on that. There's a lot of building in that area, so we made the assumption, again, that there wouldn't be any major geotechnical issues like you would have at Adams and Portola. So again, with that caveat, in that range right there in terms of the potential value of that site for development purposes, again, just the 5-acre portion.
So Melissa Trace hand still up.
I don't think that it ever went down.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll try to do that. I don't have an additional question.
Okay. So let's move on to Portola in the city of El Cerrito, not Emeryville. Because I was corrected. And I didn't fix this because I decided I liked the airplane there. So
Flying wing.
I did find the picture without it though. We were able to get that. But so this site's a very interesting site. It is the portion that we're talking about is basically where you see the yellow line, and I did that because there's a fairly significant grade separation right there down to the charter school that's down in the blacktop area with all the portables. So, and I'm gonna have some pictures that'll give you a little bit of the, how this looks in elevation view as opposed to plan view, which is what we're looking at right now. And again, you could ignore that the site is all vacant. That's just the ghost image of the old middle school site right there. So that, and so the lines that you see, there's a yellow line on the left-hand side that forms the area that sets up the, 5 acres? 5.29, so 5 1/3 acre roughly. But you'll see 2 other lines, white lines there. Those are actually drainage ditches, concrete drainage ditches that pick up water and the water shed coming off of there. That was done as part of the demolition and kind of reconstruction and fixing the grades over there to make sure that it didn't slide down on top of anything. So anyway, so you were talking about a little over 5 acres of land right there. It's a very interesting site in a lot of different ways. So let's go to the photos then. So the photo on the left is a picture down below that's looking up, and this would be from the park site. So it would be on the south side, which is Mosier. Mosier. Yeah. So, and then the right-hand side is at the top, and you're looking at phenomenal views of the bay and the Golden Gate. You can keep going on that. And this is that concrete ditch that I was talking about that picks up the drainage there. And then kind of at the base of the hill down by the yellow line looking up. It's a fairly good grade that's going up there. And then again, on the north side, you've got a fairly big PG&E substation that's across the street. And again, you can see, that drainage area right there that's picking up water coming off, so it's not creating runoff of the dirt and washouts and stuff like that. So we can go to the next one. Yes. So there's a little street at the very top of the property, and that's the street. And then on the right-hand side there's a park. It's a city park. That would be on the south side of the property. And that's all developed. It's got a couple ball fields on it. Very nice park.
Sorry, that's on the property or is that across the street?
No, it's across the street.
That's what I thought.
So if you look at this is great. Thanks, Melissa. So at see where it says Cerrito Vista Park? Sure. That's the park. So I was standing along Mosher and kind of taking pictures of, across different things right there. So this property, again, back to the political side of it, is zoned institutional and utility. That's the blue arrow right there, or the blue area where the arrow goes to on the left-hand side of the general plan. And then the zoning is a public, semi-public. So again, representing basically the school, and that would be very typical in terms of the zoning or something like that. And the arrow is incorrect. I picked that up this morning. So the arrow actually needs to go all the way up. It's pointing into the park area. So we'll fix that. Okay, next. So remember the Alquist Priola line? Don't go too fast. This is another view of it as it's traveling south. Again, this is the Hayward Fault that's creating that. And you can see this particular one is not within the Alquist Priola. But it does have different geological and geotechnical challenges in terms of slides and things like that. So it is a challenge site. There's a lot of building around it, but it is challenged right there.
It's the Lakemont slide area. I believe it's called.
Yes, I think I've looked at some of the different geotechnical stuff that
There's
Lewis
a
has supplied us.
Special assessment district for people to mitigate the effects of the slide.
Yeah.
I've been driving up and down Mosier for 60 plus years. And we've had times where Mosier itself has just, part of it has slid down and you've got as much as a 1 foot change of elevation, immediate, which plays hell with your car.
Yeah. I can imagine.
I mean, it's not something that's just all of a sudden happened.
Yeah.
It's been going on for my whole life.
Probably for as long as the dirt was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Portland was, I think, started up at Arlington. No, okay.
That's good.
All right.
That's a way to create real estate, isn't it? And who said they're not making any more of it? All right, so this is again, out of one of the things that was descriptive in terms of the geotechnical report and showing the property and kind of the topography as it's going down there. Again, you can see on there that, obviously if somebody is going to be doing something with that site, there'd be other further studies that would be required. I know the district did actually a really good job when they did the demolition on it and did all of the benching and the topography work that they did, because it looks like the drainage things are working really good. You not have a lot of, run outs and stuff like that on it. So, okay, next. So again, the district acquired this property in the late 40s. The school was built in 51, and there's really no public record matters that, from the title report that came up on it in terms of that, even minor utility stuff and things like that. But other than that, nothing. I mean, because things like the geotechnical and the landslide, that's not a public record. That's, things of public record are typically easements and where somebody's got rights to do something with that property, or there's restrictions or something like that. Okay, yes.
Scott, you might mention also, Lewis shared with us that all of the underground is gone, so that would not be a cost. When you deconstruct a school, there's wires and plumbing and pipes and things. That has all been taken out.
You can tell that with the grading work and everything, and that was in the demo report. So again, we want to help frame this for the committee in terms of what would the value be. And this is a kind of a tough one, because you've got some interesting things going on with the soils, but you can remediate that. It's just money. And if you think about that, there's a lot of building that's done on very unstable soil. There's ways to fix that, but again, it costs money. But we made the assumption there's roughly 5 acres of land there that are usable. And then, looking at it from a development perspective, something along a townhome style, where you're using the topography, you use part of it, for parking, you use part of it to build on top of it. And the one thing that came to mind when I was looking at this site, there's a development on Catalina Island in the town of Avalon. And it's a really interesting, and they used the hill exactly like this hill is when they built this. And so it's basically, they terraced it, and they used the construction of the property and the footings and the parking and everything. They used that also in terms of retaining. So it's a very interesting project, and it overlooks. It's a cool thing. It's a cool little town to begin with, but this is. So if you do a Google thing, you can find it, and it's very cool. I've walked the thing, and it's just very interesting. So I kind of looked at it from that perspective, and said, okay, well, assuming that we can, do something like that. Again, the comps in that area, because of the views, because of things like that, much higher. You can see much higher dollar per square foot. And again, looking at a value of between 17 and $20 million. And again, when somebody's looking at that, there's gonna have to be more geotech work and say, okay, is this gonna be this massive amount of money, which would be a deduct off of this? But again, you could look at something like that and say, if I can do something, depending on how I design it and how I look at it, and I'm talking about from the developer's perspective, then I think that there's some real value there. Yes, sir.
Question, actually an observation. When El Cerrito High was rebuilt, the original plan was to use the old building and build a new building next to it.
Mhm.
There was such a furor over the prospect of the houses on the hillside. And this is in the vicinity of what we're talking about. So such a furor about the people living there losing some of their view that the whole plan was scrapped. And so that they had to demolish the place, put everybody in portables, couldn't have parallel use while constructing. And I don't, just an observation about the community, depending upon how high you build these townhouses, it's going to be the same sort of scrap all over it.
I thought about that. And because whenever you're doing something where you're impacting somebody's view, that's a huge thing. And so again, I'm envisioning this, and it's very big picture, is that because of, if you look at that, the topography at the very top of the street up there, Navalier, I think is what it is.
Right.
It slopes really quick. So what you do in a development, again, this is just me looking at it, is that you come in and you start, the rooftops are basically not much higher than the sidewalk level at the top. So you're benching it down. And so again, you may have a little bit more inefficiencies on that, but I don't envision somebody coming off that Navalier Street and driving into something. I envision somebody coming from the bottom and going up to something. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Sure.
Because that's how, again, that's how you be a responsible developer, I guess. And you're looking at what are my impacts on my edge condition. That's an edge condition, those houses that are there. You don't have anything on the north side. There's nobody on the PG&E that care what you do there, as long as you connect to their thing. You have nothing on the right side, the south side, because that's the park. So really the concern was the upper part up there. And so looking at that, that's how I envision that you come in from the bottom and go up, and that you respect that top level up there.
Ray has a question.
Yeah, somewhat of a question and a bit of a comment. I mean, as someone just like Don who drives by that every day, up and down Mosier, I mean, that particular area is surrounded by a community center and a natural hillside area, and then the Cerrito Vista Park on the other side. And it's, I mean, there would be, if there was a large structure there, I mean, there would be a kind of a fundamental parking issue. I mean, when there's large events at the park, there's cars, all over the place there. It's just, and with the power station there, I question this particular spot as a prime real estate value, meaning high dollar property, given the surrounding areas. I mean, I don't know, and this one is kind of, in my view, primed for a community-centric type situation, but that's just my perspective.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that in just a second here in a couple of slides. So, again, from a development perspective, doing something like a community center, that typically requires a fairly large level footprint. And that's where you start getting into problems with developing property that are on hillsides. So shopping centers don't do well on hillsides. You got too much topography and people need to park. There's big parking requirements there. The one thing that works well on hillsides is residential, because you can make that work in terraces and you can and do different things. But again, we're talking, we're at the 20,000 foot level here. And, what we're looking at is some options. Again, the option to do sort of a commercial type building, which even a park and rec or something like that would be, is going to be a bigger challenge from a construction point of view, and basically what you're gonna have to do to the hill to make that work. But anything is possible.
and I spent more than 50 years in heavy construction, so I know a little bit about this kind of stuff. And nice thing about a relatively flat, empty plot of land, if the ground is unstable, by sliding, I mean, it's not a big deal to drive your pilings for a townhouse type thing. You don't need to be driving pilings for residential units that are just, you know, like most of us live in our homes with a backyard and everything. But for a 2 or 3 story townhouse type thing, you can drive pilings to mitigate the sliding part of it. And it's not as expensive as you might think because you've got wide open access.
I've done those before, and that's exactly the type, and that's why our suggestion was on that. Because again, we're trying to help frame a discussion around what the value might be for that. And so in order to do that, you have to come up with what would you do to set that value. Again, from my perspective, looking at a commercial type use, again, because it's such a much heavier parking demand. And so that means level stuff. And again, by the time you do that, you have not a lot left over. And I do agree with you, Trey, that I've been up there where, I mean, you know, I wanted to open up a car valet service, you know, and drive people and do a little Uber thing there because you'd made a lot of money schlepping people around. But again, I think that you can, like you mentioned, Don, do something, you know, whether it's piles or whether it's a combination of different things where you're doing you're retaining type things and then piles on that to where you can create areas. You just have more flexibility in a residential type townhome project that's attached than you would if you do, even if you did single families. Doesn't make any sense to me to do that. So again, all I wanted to do was for this committee help frame a potential, here's what you can do, and try to put a number on it. So as you're evaluating it, you can say, okay, well, you know, the push ain't worth the pull, or it is worth the pull. So, okay. So onward, we're on our last one. We're at Sea View, which is, it does have a view of the sea. So this is an interesting parcel. It was, you can see there's actually 2 separate parcels. And there's a 4.6 acre parcel, parcel 1 that's labeled on the map that you're looking at, the aerial map. And that is where the old school was. And you can kind of see some of the footings and some of the different things that were still there, the parking area, the blacktop area along there. And that was where the original school site was. And just to the left of that, and basically part of parcel 2, the 3.3 acres, that's Garrity Creek. And then you can see there's a crossing over there. That's a footbridge. You'll see that in pictures in a second. But there is no access from parcel 1 to parcel 2 except by crossing over the footbridge. So, and I'm going to demonstrate, I'll show you that in a second with the photos. So, and then the other thing that's really important to note is where Melissa has the hand right there. If you can see that, that's a railroad track. And then if you can go to the north, Melissa, that's a railroad track. So this is the hamburger in the between the 2 pieces of buns, which are the railroad tracks. So it's you know, fairly constrained in terms of that. It's accessed off of San Pablo Road, and you go in. I can't remember the name of the street. There's a little shopping area right there, and you go in. And it's kind of one way in, one way out. So so again, interesting parcel. That part was originally, and it was deeded by the county. That was originally an extension of a road right there, and I'll show you that in just a second. So again, looking at this, you've got the district-owned properties, and then off to the left of that, there's the county has some ball fields right there. So, and those are actually accessed off of Terra Hills Drive. You can see that right there. And then I'm going to show you what Terra Hill Drives look like in just a second.
Before we go to the next slide, that I'm just curious, on the upper right, that big green circular area, what was that?
That was the drop-off area for the school. That was the turnaround. Yeah, parking.
The green part was?
No,
It was landscaped.
It was landscape. Yeah, I think it was landscape.
Okay.
I actually walked this building back in, we did an initial report on this, I think back in 2010. So the buildings were still up there. Actually have the old pictures. Right?
The reason everything's round, it was a round school. It was built in that era when they made the schools round and all the teachers were gonna trade kids back and forth.
They were impossible to use modular buildings. And we had our professional development there
They're difficult.
and
to-
offices.
Yeah.
And it was very, very difficult to lecture in a room where the walls were always curving.
Being a teacher at that era, the architects got ahead with a clever design, forgot to talk to the people that were gonna use it.
I agree
Not
with
the
that.
first and last time that happened. Okay, Melissa, we can move on now. So, so the photo on the left is, off of, I think it's Seabrook Drive right there. So that, if you look straight ahead, that's the drop-off area, Don, and that you were referring to, and Lewis, that you showed that. And then I'm just, taking a photo across the blacktop area of the school. So on the left is the picture of the footbridge that you saw in the aerial view, the plan view, and then a picture of Garrity Creek. That's just a local runoff that goes into the bay, and there's a trestle, railroad trestle that you can see in the distance there. That frames the property boundary. Excuse me. So on the left-hand side is a picture of the old field, because this area right there was used as a ball field. So that is the old backstop and all of that. I'm not sure anybody want to play on it now or could play on it now. And then the access I told you for that, for the district site, the parcel 2 site, as well as where the county ball fields are, is Terra Hills. That is Terra Hills Drive. That comes in off of San Pablo Road. So it's a fairly narrow little area, and it's a private drive that goes in there. So when we look at that, and I'll get into that in a second, in terms of what can you do with this, in terms of something, there's not a lot because it's difficult to access. Okay. So again, this is
Question.
Went too far.
Hi, in terms of cars accessing the site, how did the school drop off work? Am I missing something?
No, the school drop off worked. Sorry to go back on the. If we can go back on to the original aerial. So they were right there. So they were off of the street. Go back one more. So see on parcel 1, up by where it says Seaview, that area right there.
Yes.
That was the pickup and drop off right there.
Got it. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't realize we moved on to the parcel 2 area. Continue. Thank you.
Yeah, then exactly. So then the first couple of pictures, the elevation pictures, if you will, were of parcel 1, and then showing the crossing. And then Melissa, can you point the crossing where the crossing is right there? So that's the footbridge that goes over. It's pedestrian only. And then that's really the access way that the students use to get to the fields, and then the fields where the area basically where somebody's doing a whole bunch of donuts down there. But there was and still is fencing and a backstop area right there. But again, fairly not in very good condition. Does that help? I guess it does. Okay,
Yes, thank you.
terrific. So we go on to the next one, which is go back to our geopolitical stuff. So again, the general plan is underway right now, and the left hand is the side that right there, and you can see where the arrow is pointing to. That is the general plan now is public, semi-public, which is the same that we had for Adams, and then the general plan that they're proposing is for residential. So that is the proposed, it's brown color in the new one on the right-hand panel. The left-hand panel is still showing as the green area right there, which is public and park and rec. So again, with zoning, the same thing as zoned HI, R6, which is 6 units to the acre in the current zone, and the proposed is still the same. They haven't made any changes in that. So here's where we get into some interesting things from the title perspective. So what you're seeing on the left-hand side is the original parcel map for the subdivision. And it includes, and I'm going to show you another picture where it shows all of the, where the district property is, because it's all different now. The Southwood Street, that was that's the street that you saw that I took a picture of, and pretty much everything that to the downside of that is all where the school district. So that's the original parcel map for the entire subdivision. But on the right-hand side, there's a CC&Rs, and I wanted to print this because it's fairly significant. It's something that we picked up a long time ago when we did our original report. And you look where I've got it highlighted under, I think it's number 1 right there. There's a thing right there, and I'll just read it. No building other than one detached single-family dwelling or necessary buildings used in conjunction with the dwelling shall be erected or maintained on any lot, and no use whatsoever shall be made of any lot except for its use and improvement as a single-family private residence. So that's baked into this, the conditions, covenants and conditions and restrictions for the entire subdivision. And there's, in this particular, there's 150 units that, so all the, not just the units that you're seeing here that are platted out on this map, but everything to the north of that or the upper part of that. So the 150 units that are subject to these CC&Rs. So we've talked to legal counsel about this, and they've concurred with what our feeling is that the only way to make that go away is by getting a majority of 150 people to say it's okay to do something else with it.
You're talking about the other property owners?
Yeah, you're talking about there's 21 lots that are subject to the original map that this covered, and there's 150 in the total area right there. So I can tell you from a lot of experience that the probability of that happening is not real high. So there is that does limit the use of this property. That's why I wanted to bring it to everybody's attention.
I'm curious on considering that area. How many absentee landlords there are as opposed to residents?
I couldn't tell you that.
Because you're dealing with landowners, not people actually live, the renters there.
Those would be the people that would vote on something like that. And again, I don't know if I had to guess, I'll bet you that at least 20 to 25% are non-owner occupied.
Don, that's a really good point. We drove the neighborhood, both Scott and I, at different times in the early 2000s, and it was definitely a rental neighborhood. You could tell by the yards. We drove it just a few weeks ago, and we're quite impressed with the upgrade of the homes in the area. Things like doors, lawns, landscaping. And so that assumption would have to be validated. We think there are more homeowners now, but how many more from the original, do not know.
And I'm not in the real estate business like you all are, but I would, it seems to me that if you put in a nice new development in that area, it's going to be raising the property values for these people. So that might be a selling point to get them to agree.
There's lots of things that, here's how that world works. You want to change something, I don't care what it is. I've had people argue things over coming in. We just did a project in San Jose where we did $3 million houses next to their $1 million houses, and they didn't want it. Change is a really interesting thing. So again, I'm not saying that that it's insurmountable. I'm just saying it's a hill, and it's a pretty good size hill, because all it takes is one person to say, wait a second, you can't do that, or what are you going to give to me, or whatever it's going to be. So it's a legal document, and again, it's there. It impacts stuff. how we, and we're gonna get into it, okay, well, how do you value that? Well, it's actually pretty straightforward on that, so maybe we can continue on.
Well, and if and when this committee makes a recommendation and the board then takes action, some legal activity would need to take place to look at those CCRs and see what state laws may or may not apply.
We did that. So it's already, it's state law, and that's, it's enforcement by those neighbors. It's not, it wouldn't be enforced by the local jurisdiction. It's enforced by the neighbors. So anyway, so one of the other constraints that impacts this particular property is there's a flood, and whenever you're looking at close to water, you've got a creek. What's the FEMA, and that's Federal Emergency National Association that does the mapping on that, creates base flood elevation. So the parcel 1, which is where the school was, that's pretty much out of the flood area. There's a little piece of it that's nicked right there. You can kind of tell the tan piece. And it's a 0.2%, chance of something happening, but it's a minor one. So it's fairly straightforward on that. What is impacted, and you can see where the creek goes right there, and it's the kind of the hatch. It almost looks like a railroad track right there. And on the left-hand side, yeah, that's right there. Thank you. So on the left-hand side, you can see the blue color. That is a flood area right there. So in order to develop and build in a flood area, first of all, you got to be able to get there. It's not easy to get there, but there are a lot more restrictions in terms of what you can do in that area in terms of any kind of development. So you can see all of that area right there. That's where all the ball fields are. There's no impact to things like that. It only comes into play if you're doing something where people are occupying that space. So, and then again, you have to build up, you have to do a lot of other things, and there's a lot of restrictions that come in terms of what you can and cannot do in those kinds of areas. So again, it's a restriction, and it really doesn't impact the original school site, but it does impact the play area, the field area right there. Okay.
This is Doreen, a follow-on question for parcel 2. What is the emergency evacuation plan there? So I'm a little worried with that little connecting strip that may not be sufficient if you did residential or actually anything. I kind of think about. Good.
No, go ahead.
I kind of think about the situation over in Alameda, Bay Farm Island, where there's one way in, one way out. And should there ever be a fire or some sort of, catastrophic emergency, the residents there would be sort of stuck. And I want to not, I mean, it's my opinion only, not design something that subjects whoever's using parcel 2 to that type of condition.
I absolutely agree. I mean, you're going to hear our assumptions and assessments in just a second, but there's 2 issues there. There's the flood, plain issue, where even if you were to build there, you have to build up and you can't displace things. There's a lot of different rules and regulations on that. And then there's also access. So this is a good map that shows the access part. So if you go, Melissa, down, see where it says Seaview, and then go to the right of that, kind of down, go down. And keep going, keep down to San Pablo Road. Keep going. Right there. So there's San Pablo. So if you go up a little bit and no, to the right, kind of, there you go. And that's it. So you turn in on Terra Hills. There's a gas station right there, and the Nations. Good burgers. I've eaten there.
Yeah.
So if you go up, then there's a road. That's the road that actually goes up. Keep going up. No, I'm sorry.
Along the outline.
Along that. So right there, there's a road like. You're at a bad angle, aren't you?
Yeah.
No, that's.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can do it. So we're okay. Here we go. So right here, this is San Pablo Road, and this is Terra Hills Drive. So there's a big mobile home park right here. And this actually goes in, and then this is like self-contained community right there. But then that road that goes in, remember the picture, the trestle and the railroad crossing? That's right here. So this is that little 1 lane. You would never be able to develop that site that the district has without creating a road that was accessible to police, fire, public safety, two ways and all the other stuff. So it would be a fairly expensive proposition to do and probably almost impossible to do. So one of the things that, whenever you're along a large body of water, you probably have heard about sea rise level and, what's going on with all of that. So we mapped that 10 years ago. We mapped it again. It's a little bit different, not a lot, because it's all dependent on the elevation, but we wanted to share that with the committee. So the area, you can see where the original school site was, and that's completely clear right there. It's pretty much got a barrier with the sea, with the elevation and railroad and everything else. That's, yeah, thank you, Melissa. Right there, that's the original site that comes in and kind of goes through that area. And then the dark blue is the Garrity Creek, and that's right there. That's the dividing line. Again, just to put it back into perspective for everybody. And then the light blue area, that area right there, where Melissa's got the hand, that is the ballpark, the old ballpark area. That is the parcel 2, and you can see that that's also going to be subject to a sea rise level, potential sea rise level. So again, there's a lot of things working against that parcel 2 in terms of doing anything with it, in terms of a development where there's people that are there. For fields, it's fine. For park, it's fine. But for development, not so fine.
Couldn't help but notice the color you chose for that is the color of most bodies of water.
I didn't choose that. That's actually FEMA that does all of that. So we didn't do that. It's this is all public information. You go to the BCDC and FEMA. They produce these sea rise level maps, and again, it just they map it differently. That's their colors. We just grabbed it and said that's pretty descriptive. It's water. It's blue.
Somebody was having fun with it.
Somebody was having fun. So again, that's a constraint of that particular piece of property. So from the title issue, we talked a little bit about that already, but again, the district acquired the site in 68. The school was built in 72. It was demolished, I'm going to say in 12, 13, something like that, that time frame. Because when I walked, it was vacant. It was all there, and that was in 2010 when we did our original report. And then it was, a few years later than that. So again, I've noticed some of the things that we've talked about that's actually referenced in the title report, that there may be some title or partially submerged. That's some of those areas that you saw in the blue. There is no recorded public access to the phase 2 or the parcel 2 portion, which is the field area. There are various utility easements, both wet and dry, on the portions of the property. And then again, the one of the significant ones in the CCNRs is the land use and limitations on that to single family residential, and then the impact of the 2 rail tracks that are joining the property. So again, when we look at this, we actually went through, the 4.6 acres. We took the old parcel map, and there are 21 parcels that made that up back in the original thing. So, from, what you should be able to do that people couldn't challenge you on in terms of the CCNRs, you should be able to build 21 homes on that. So it doesn't have to be in the same configuration, but that, and we've actually, I know 10 years ago, we looked at that and that was very achievable to do. So again, right now, my number 3 is that there's not, the value of the property that's South Garrity Creek is really just a function of what can I do with it, and there's, it's park and rec, it's things like that. So there's a value to it, but we didn't try to assign a value to it. We did assign the value to, the range of what we felt that the developer would pay for that. Again, we're in the $15 to $18 a square foot for the land, which would impute a value of $3 to $3.5 million plus.
What's the assessed value of the adjoining parcels, the homes and the lots?
There right now, we ran the comps on that. I'm gonna reserve the right to change the number on this when I look at it, but we did look at all of that, and I want to say they're in the 700s, depending on how big the houses were, something like that.
Okay.
So again, we've imputed a value of 21 of right around, 150 a lot, something like that. Because it's pretty much finished. I mean, there's not a lot, you have to put streets in, but the utilities are all there. Everything is there. So it's not a finished lot. It's almost like a blue top lot, which is a one step below I can start building on it.
Scott, would you share a snippet? I believe Rachel Lim's on the call of our conversation with the East Bay Regional Park District.
Certainly. One of the things, and Rachel certainly, she can raise her hand on this also, but we did have a conversation with her in regards to an extension of the East Bay Regional Trail System. And maybe Rachel, you can, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that would be, this would be a good time to comment on that.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Hi, I'm Rachel Lim, Senior Real Property Specialist at the East Bay Regional Park District. We operate about 125,000 acres in Alameda and Contra Costa County, as well as quite a bit of trail network. And we're working on the Bay Trail in this location, where we're looking to connect our Point Pinole Regional Park, Regional Shoreline, through this area up to Wilson Point, where we have some additional parkland. And so we're looking to potentially acquire a trail easement through this area that would just be kind of linear along the kind of northern side of the parcels adjacent to the railroad line on that side, that would pass through the property to connect to our Bay Trail segments on either side. And we're also interested in potentially having a trail easement that would connect through the property through parcel 1, kind of location to be decided, that would allow the adjacent neighborhood off of Cypress Avenue and those existing streets to connect to the Bay Trail, because otherwise the Bay Trail kind of runs right behind those properties and they don't actually have any way to get out there and connect. So the Park District's provided an example map of what an easement could look like through this area, as well as a letter talking about why we're interested in it, what we're trying to achieve over here. So I hope you take that into consideration while you're discussing the property. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
Okay,
So, hi, this is Doreen. I don't think we were provided that in the minutes.
no, we will provide that that information. We do have it.
Okay, sounds good.
And a big part of that, just piggybacking, and we did have a call with Rachel, and a big part of that, in terms of how that would be, we want to, depending on what the district is going to do with this property, obviously that's the first stage right here. And then being able to incorporate, access or easement or whatever into that seems like a fairly straightforward process. But again, that we would want the developers, if the district decided to do something with this and dispose of it, surplus and dispose of it, we would want them to, weigh in on all that too. So I think that's the end.
One of Tara's efforts was to reach out to non-school people, other government agencies. You have many cities in your district and many county agencies, as well as park districts. And so we were trying to be as transparent as we possibly could be.
So in summary, and again, we're banging up against an 8-hour or 8 o'clock time slot here that we said that we'd be in. What we wanted to do, and we will provide, the additional information on the park thing there. I think that's important for the committee to consider as they're doing all of that. But I'm hoping that this gave everybody, there's a lot of information there, but I'm hoping it gave everybody a pretty good snapshot, again, from about 5,000 feet of some of the opportunities and constraints with all of these sites. And again, in terms of starting, the next step is, obviously you guys all need to digest this information and then, start, framing, and our next meeting that we'll have on the 27th, we want to have an outline framework of things that we would like the committee to be able to start filling in of what they would like in terms of recommendations to go to the board. So I'm open for any questions. I hope this has been helpful, instructional, all that good stuff for everybody. Again, lots of information. And if there's questions, whether they're now or later, you can certainly email us and you know, we'll do our best to answer them. So I think we got a couple of hands raised.
I'd like to ask a question about Seaview.
Samantha?
Yes, hi. So I still think we should plan a visit. I personally am familiar with maybe 2 of the sites that I've seen, but I feel like needing to be on site is going to be very important in our decision-making process and in making recommendations. So I think we need to move forward with some sort of plan for this before we finalize any sort of recommendations for the board.
Trey.
Yeah, sorry if this has already been addressed because I've been away for some of the early meetings, but just at the highest level, is there any reason why all 4 sites are being decided upon in the same process here? Or can there be a little bit of a more progression as things become more clear on specific sites and then things kind of roll down the line? What is the big picture situation?
Well, I'm going to defer to Louis and Melissa on that, but the board, you know, formed this committee to look at these 4 sites. So that was really, it was at the instigation of the board that this all started. But Louis, I'll let you.
No, I don't believe there's much more to add. We're looking for the highest and best use for these properties as we look at surplus properties that were no longer usable as school sites for us, or possibly.
I was just looking for a tiny bit of the backstory. It sounded like so many of these sites were being evaluated, you know, between 10 and 15 years ago. So I thought there might be some more information there on the present moment versus sort of the evolution of the process. So.
Well, I can answer part of that. We did a study for the district back in 2010. There were some other sites that were part of that also. And again, it was just to evaluate, you know, what was going on at the time. Portal was still open. In fact, it closed, I think, in 2010, 2011. You know, so that was the last year that was open. Seaview was closed, but it had only been closed for a couple of years. And then the Adams site was definitely closed. And we did not look at the Harman Knowles site. So we looked at a couple of other sites on that. So again, I brought that up only in terms of we've been familiar with these properties over a period of years, but the direction that we received from the board and that this committee received from the board was to, you know, we want to evaluate the property. We want to, you know, we are looking for a recommendation to surplus these properties or whatever from this committee.
It's quite common, Trey, for school districts that are in declining enrollment, in West Contra Costa is, to give you just some quick numbers, you've had a 22% enrollment decline in the last 20 years, from 34,000 down to 26,000. So there are properties that are not being used and may not need to be used. And that, when you drop enrollment, reduces the revenue that your district has. And so property is one way to offset some of the potential cuts that will be coming, that all school districts. California is facing a declining in enrollment, and West Contra is very typical of the numbers in the state, especially for large urban districts.
Gotcha. The one comment I had about that space was, I heard the first year that Korematsu opened, they had an overcrowding meeting, within the first 6 months of the building even being open. So I know we're right up against the time here, but I didn't know what the current state of affairs was for the middle school population and expectations based on that information that I had in the community.
Don.
Actually, Jim, you had your hand up before.
Well, I just wanted to make a comment about parcel 2 at Seaview. So there would be continuing liability if we didn't divest ourselves of parcel 2. if you develop parcel 1, you hang on to parcel 2, and it's open to anybody to go in to use it for whatever the purpose is, and something occurs there, then would the district potentially be liable for negligence if we're not exercising proper control over that land?
Well, I would say that's the case in pretty much all the parcels, if you don't, if you're, unless you're fencing things off and things like that. But in terms of that parcel 2 for Seaview, I'm not suggesting in any way, shape, or form that the district hang on to that parcel. It's going to have a separate track in terms of what is it worth. And again, that what we're trying to do is frame what something
So,
might be worth.
Follow-up question, could it possibly be transferred to the county? Or
You can't just transfer it to somebody. That's a gift of public funds, even if it's to another public agency. So there's a process that you would have to go through. But again, one of the recommendations that this board or this committee could come up with is that we would like the board to consider, doing something that enhances a recreational thing for something else. Now, what does that mean? I don't know, but that could be a recommendation that
there's an adjacent recreational use.
there certainly is. Yes, sir.
I'm going to want to touch on something that Trey said. I know that we've been discussing actively between the board and other people, 5 or 6 years at least, these 4 parcels. And I know that in earlier years, I can remember at least 4 or 5 other school sites that we closed down and transferred out there by El Portel. There used to be right next to that Schwinn bicycle shop. They've got used to be a little elementary school right there. And now it's many acres of townhouses, okay, because we didn't need it as much anymore. But I think one of the things that has brought this to the forefront right now is the district needs the money a lot. But even so, when we first started talking about this option of trading the property for other sites that are already developed, with a developer, a housing complex that be a revenue generator in some other part of the Sacramento or Stockton or something like that. That was being discussed about 3 years ago, if I recall correctly. And even trying to form this 7-Eleven committee. I mean, it took us 1.5 years to get the applications in, appoint them, and have our first meeting. It's a slow process on us. And something that Sam was saying, I agree 1,000% that we need to be able to go out and visit these sites. I've been blessed in being able to go out to these sites quite a bit. But everything I've seen has been from outside the fence line. And I know it looks different once you get out, you cross that through that gate and you see things from the inside. It gives you a completely different perspective. We need to be able to see these sites. And the Seaview site that's one I haven't seen, because it's so isolated, and I'll be honest with you, not really exciting to go out there. So, but if we can schedule some sort of a site visit, I think it would behoove us all.
I know we talked about that before, and I agree with you. It's a logistics issue, though, and that's one of the things why I wanted to take pictures. And again, it's never the same as viewing it. So I'm a big believer in walking on the dirt. So again, we'll take the lead from the committee of what they want to do. Again, I know when we talked about this at the very first meeting, it was a logistical issue trying to get everybody a time to do something, and then how do we do it? Do we rent a bus? Do we how do we do that? So again, I'm going to leave that up to the really smart people at the district here to figure that out, Louis and Melissa.
Look back to you on that one.
Yeah. Hi, this is Doreen again. And apologies, I don't have the benefit of seeing who's speaking, but I agree with what's been said by 2 of the speakers. I think Trey was the last one. We do need to see the spot, especially if we're making these types of decisions. And second, a lot of the proposal is, mixed use, so housing and retail or housing. Curious what the figures would look like if we did something that was more revenue generating long-term for the district, not just a one-time sell to a developer. If we have any stats on that.
Let me, Doreen, comment. It's up to the board to what to do with the property, but from a real estate consulting point of view, neither Scott or I believe a property should be sold, take the cash, put it in the general fund, because 3 years later, you won't know where it is. We recommend
Exactly.
the district look at exchanges, and you have a piece of property and exchange it for an income producing property that's going to give you a
Exactly.
certain amount of money year after year. But also it gives you total land assets. So let's say in the next generation, way past this, 50, 60 years from now, you need another school. You have an asset that may be commercial that you could then trade back for a school in 2175. 2275.
So again, Barry's absolutely right. We always advise our public school district clients never to get rid of their assets, but it's okay to
Yeah.
around and trade them for something. And again, what we're suggesting is basically setting that up for this committee in terms of, well, what kind of values are we looking at? And again, that you can trade them for lots of different things. We've traded them for income producing properties. We've traded them for other school sites. We've done lots of exchanges. We've done lots of ground leases. Again, the goal is to, what kind of value can we get at the highest and best use? And then what can we take as a school district and recommend to the board that here's what we think that you should do.
And each application is different, Doreen, based on where the land is, what the condition of the land is, what's the highest and best use. And so it's per site.
Got it. Because, I'm not familiar with any of these areas, but I've been curious, what is the schooling situation that has led to this situation? So did the children there shift to a different school district or different school site? I need a little backstory here.
Well, just to give you a little bit of statewide, enrollment in the state of California has been going down. It happens in the 80s. It happened around 2000, about every 20 years, every generation. And as we know, young people are having fewer kids. They're having kids later in life. And California is an expensive place to live. So, for example, my son chose to go to Arizona. And that happens a lot too, as well as the academic program of the school, and a lot of other factors come into it.
So one of the things, Doreen, also that we'll be answering as part of the final report is the, kind of the distribution of all that. It is, you've heard that there's declining enrollment. That's why these sites aren't needed. And there's clearly capacity at the school sites that are in that area that are serving that particular geographic section of whatever it is, whether it's county or city. So that part, the reason why the district formed this committee was that they recognized that they don't have a need for this, nor do they believe they're ever going to have a need for this. And again, you layer some of the issues on top of that for these particular sites. So take the Portola site. The potential of building a site at that location as a public school is pretty thin, and it's that way because of topography. It's that way because of the substation that's right there. So again, I don't think the district will be able to get state funding for that. So again, it's a location issue. It's a site condition issue, and it's a declining enrollment issue. And that's why the district is formed this committee to help guide them and give them advice on that. Don.
Got it.
So I need to add on there, on at least 3 of those 4 sites, there's a reason why we closed the schools. We closed Adams because it was sitting on top of a fault line. For some reason, people think it's a bad idea to have little kiddies going to school on top of a major fault line. And with Portola, the school was sliding down the hill. it's not like we can rebuild a school on there unless we do, put in 500 piles to stabilize the ground. And he was Seaview. Try to get funding to build a school sandwiched between two major railroad tracks.
Can't do it
I mean,
anymore.
it's just not going to happen. These really aren't options for us for putting schools back on these sites. Harman Knowles, it's a different story. But I mean, again, there's a reason why we closed those schools to begin with. It wasn't because of declining enrollment. It was physically there was a problem because we didn't need to close down Portal and Adams in particular. Those were perfectly good schools. I mean, I got 2 coats of paint, they would have been like brand new.
Yeah, there's.
Yeah,
different-
personally, personally, the one that gives me angst is Harman Knowles, because to me, it's just surrounded by community, front, right, left, back, as I see it. So I just don't want to offset the community that's there and their needs.
When you guys have mentioned exchanges, I'm very curious as to how the logistics of that would work. And when you say exchange, how does that process take place?
It's actually pretty straightforward. I mean, the exchanges are done lots in the private world, if you will, but they're also done quite frequently for public agencies, especially school districts. So an exchange works, the school district has a site, they have the Seaview site, and there's a developer that would like to acquire that site. So the district needs to find another piece of property, and in that other piece of property, for lack of a better term, and I always use this because it sticks in everybody's mind, I want to buy a Taco Bell. A Taco Bell is a triple net lease, send me a check every, asset, or a CVS or a Walgreens. And it says, oh, I want an income stream, and I can buy that Taco Bell or that CVS, with the money that I'm going to get out of that. So the developer comes in and buys the Taco Bell or the CVS, and then they turn around and just do a trade. That's it. And it happens all in the same day. So the trade side is very, very straightforward, used all the time. I've done hundreds of millions of dollars of trades, and they're very straightforward and very easy to do.
Let me give you a specific example, Trey. There's a school district down in the South Bay that in 1985, it was an old school built in the 50s. They had declining enrollment, as I mentioned, in the 80s. They didn't sell the school. They leased it to Home Depot. The school was full of asbestos and some other things. Home Depot came in and cleared that up, and they have been leasing that site from the school district for the last 30 years at $1 million a year, each year.
Gotcha.
So that's the kind of thing, and it's always dependent on the value. Scott and I have worked with other districts where they had some dirt, but the zoning wasn't correct, and the dirt may have been worth $12 million, and because we got the zoning changed, it became worth 27. A person wanted to put homes on that. The district bought an office building that's run by a third party, and they collect over $1 million a year, and that just happened about 2 years ago. So it's always about who, where, when, but that's a concept where you still own some land and you're getting revenue, and your students today need that revenue because your enrollment's not going up and your cost of housing a student is going up. Fewer students, but it still is the same amount to put asphalt down or a library.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really like the idea of long-term revenue. I mean, I can't really get behind these plans to just sell and be done with these properties. It just seems like there has to be a long-term commitment to these properties in my gut. And I mean, of course, and some of these don't have to be decided at the moment if they're turned into a park and rec use or whatever, and then that could be done as a second phase down the line.
I just want to echo everyone's sentiments about hesitation about recommendations to sell. I don't think this school district could ever rebuy that property or generally buy property again. Like, I just don't see how with the current trend in finance with WCCUSD, how they would consider borrowing a lot of money to buy or rent a property. So, when I think someone had mentioned, recommendations based on the benefit of students, we also have to be good stewards of taxpayer money. And part of that is acknowledging that we lose these properties, we may never be able to recover that. We may, whether or not they're useful or not, that's not, that's not even part of the equation, in my opinion. It's just acknowledging that there are resources the school district currently has that they may not ever have again if we let them go. And that's in the back of my mind in everything that we discuss.
We don't disagree with you at all, and I don't think your administration does either. It's just the highest and best use for students to produce an income without giving up the property.
So do we have any other comments or questions? This has been a great discussion, and we're eating into everybody's extra time here. And nobody's getting overtime. So we're after 8. So I don't see any hands being raised right now. A lot of information there. We will be meeting in 2 weeks. And our goal is to have in front of you before that time, as part of the agenda, an outline of a report that you can start filling in, or that we can start filling in, and getting further comments and further information on thoughts and everything else. Again, doing things or making recommendations to the board, like, we don't want to sell, but we're okay with exchanging to create revenue sources. Again, I think we need to acknowledge, and that was brought up a couple of times, the viability of those sites. And one of the things that is not necessarily a good thing is just to let something sit there. That's not being a good asset of that, or a good steward of that asset either. So if being able to take something and turn it into something that creates revenue, that's something that, is always what we like to recommend. But again, it's going to be up to this group to make that final recommendation. So, but we do want to, we do need to start outlining recommendations on that. I think the one thing that is still up in the air is the coordination of being able to go and visit the sites. So again, that's a much bigger logistical issue than anything else, and trying to get just trying to get all the find a date that worked for everybody just for these meetings was a challenge. So I mean, I'm open to it. I love the idea. But how do we do that, and when do we do that?
So on the agenda, we do still have an item remaining, which was the election of officers. So I know that we're already past time. It's 8:17. So asking the committee if that's something that they would like to push to the next meeting, or if that's something that they'd like to do now.
Push.
So want to be respectful of everybody's time. I know my daughter's now gone to bed, so I'll see her in the morning.
So if we can, I'd make a motion that we move the election of officers to the next meeting. If there's a second.
Second that motion.
There's a motion and a second. If you see a raise of hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. One more. 5. There we go. Thank you.
And not to leave our member Doreen Chan out, could you just share it with us verbally since you're on the phone?
Sure, approved.
Unanimously approved. We'll move that to the front of the next agenda as an action item so that we can accomplish that. Want to thank everybody for their participation tonight. I know it's a late night. It's a lot of information. We will work internally to see how we can try to create the logistics as the committee's recommended for the site tours and still remain in compliance for the Brown Act. And most likely we'll be reaching out by phone to try to coordinate some dates and see how we can put that together. Just want to thank everybody again. And just quickly, kind of in a closing, you know, I think there's some great expertise on this call and on this committee. We really appreciate everybody's thoughtful consideration. And I just want to do a quick plug. We have some other committees. We have a Citizens Bond Oversight Committee that's also looking for members. And so I'll be sharing via email some more information about that if anyone's interested in joining us on that committee as well. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.